y'all, church trauma is real. Now let me deal with the trauma. In post-traumatic stress disorder, where I got PTCD from, there are a cluster of symptoms that people experience. And I found that I experienced these. I had PTCD, post-traumatic church disorder. Man, I got so traumatized by the church, I'm not assigning any fault that I didn't want to have anything to do with church. I don't want to have anything to do with no apostles, prophets, especially apostles and prophets, pastors, evangelists, but definitely not apostles and prophets. I didn't want to hear none of that mess. And I go to a church now, y'all, so I'm not tripping. I'm just giving y'all the raw and the real. Because when people don't when people don't want to go to church anymore, see, we just say that they're not faithful to God. We say they wasn't real with God in the first place. But if you actually understood post-traumatic stress disorder, you would understand post-traumatic church disorder, why people don't want to return back to the church. Because there are real psychological symptoms attached to when you get hurt by the church. And here they go. The first one is re-experiencing. The second one is intrusive thoughts. The third one is avoidance. The fourth one is negative changes in cognition and mood. And then alterations in arousal and reactivity. This is called. Now, let me break this down. So, post-traumatic church disorder is when you've been so traumatized by the church that they cause these symptoms. You hear it? They cause these symptoms, meaning the triggers that trigger the symptoms in you are connected to what happened to you in the church. Now, it is true that some of these triggers can be attached to other things in your life, but please don't negate the severity of how the church can hurt someone. Again, if it was just me and the pastor and we got into it, if the pastor rejected me, that's one injury. But once the pastor rejects me, sometimes the rest of the 99 reject me. Now I have 99 pieces of trauma I'm dealing with instead of one. That's why oftentimes it's more severe. So let's deal with re-experiencing. In re-experiencing, you have recurrent intrusive memories, flashbacks, and nightmares, meaning that when you get hurt in the church really bad, a lot of that comes with a shame and a guilt. A lot of that comes with an internal injury. You're not bleeding on the outside, but you're actually bleeding on the inside. And you start to re-experience even other traumas that you had in your life that this trauma reminds you of. So some of that trauma is not all contributed to the church, but what happens in the church becomes a trigger to the other traumas a person has had. So it's multiplied trauma throughout your life because you came to church to get healed from trauma, and now you are re-traumatized by the place you're supposed to be healed at. It's like going to the hospital to get your right leg removed, and they make a mistake and cut off your left leg. Now you got to get the right one cut off because they didn't do the surgery the same way. Now you have no legs. It's like now you end up worse off than you were before. And you get intrusive thoughts about stuff people said that's attached to some shame or maybe some guilt. Intrusive stuff about you being exiled from a church. And you re-experience this shame and this guilt. You experience how the sadness and the depression from this. And because you were so attached to those people, sometimes when that's cut off, it's hard for a person to deal with. That's re-experiencing an intrusive thoughts where you can't get that hurt out of your mind. You constantly think about it all the time. Now what happens to you in the real world with your husband or your wife or your children or at work or wherever you go, little offenses in those spheres of your life now start to remind you of your church hurt. So your trauma is being multiplied. Your trauma is being multiplied because the place of healing became the place of hurting. Do y'all feel it? The place of healing became the place of hurting. So now, instead of you coming to church to be healed from what's happening on the outside, you're actually hurting on the inside of the church more than you were hurting on the outside of it. But now that you're not even in the church, because now you're separated from the church because you got hurt really bad, and the 99 ain't letting you back in, and the 99 don't even want to have a conversation. Now what happens to you? You're just hurt. Re-experiencing an intrusive thoughts. And because of re-experiencing intrusive thoughts, post-traumatic stress disorder like PTCD and post-traumatic stress disorder is something called avoidance. Avoidance. So let's take it from outside of the church. You know, when you see it, if you've been bitten by a poisonous snake and it bit you, if you walk outside of your house and you're looking at a water hose and it looks like a snake, you're going to jump back. Anything that looks like a snake, you're going to avoid. This is what happens when people get traumatized by the church. Anything that looks like the church, they avoid it. If they got wounded by an apostle, not going there. A prophet, not going there. Tithing, not doing that. Going to church on Sundays, not doing that. You know why? Because they're traumatized. They're not avoiding the discipline of the gospel. They're not avoiding God. They're avoiding the trauma that they experienced in the church. They're not running away from God. They're running away from the trauma. Just like if you got bit by a poisonous snake before, you're going to avoid a snake. Because in the snake, there's poison. So they view the church as the snake with the poison, so they avoid it altogether, so they're not re-traumatized. Everything about church becomes a trigger. It becomes intrusive thoughts. It becomes re-experience. It becomes the place I got injured. It becomes the place where I got shut out in exile. It becomes the place where my heart was stumped and tread upon. It becomes the place where nobody cared for me. It became the place where my little cut became a stab wound because nobody wanted to deal with the trauma. We rather deal in drama. So what people do is they avoid the drama and the trauma and they stay away. You can make up any kind of justifications. They were wrong, they were right. I'm just giving you the facts. We don't deal with the trauma. We deal in the drama. And that stuff hurts. It's avoidance. It happens. It happens in relationships all the time. It happens if you really got injured in a bad car accident. I remember I was in a bad car accident, a van that slipped over 8 times. Dude, I almost had anxiety attacks when I rode in cars for the next 2 to 3 months because cars reminded me of that trauma. So I avoided getting in cars. I didn't want to ride in cars because it reminded me of the drama. It's no different in PTCD, post-traumatic church disorder. People don't want to have anything to do with the church because they're traumatized. And instead of us trying to heal the trauma, we want to talk about the drama. We'd rather be right than to help people heal. We'd rather slander their name than to help them be healed. Right? And I don't really care how people feel about my perspective of it because I just want to deal with the trauma of it. I've been traumatized by the church and I got healed. And I'm back in church. Now, do I avoid certain things? I sure do. I sure do. And if I don't avoid it, you best believe I'm getting to this next symptom. The next symptom is called alterations in arousal and reactivity. You have something called hypervigilance. In hypervigilance, you scan your area for threats. You looking around like, yo, what's up? Who gonna stab me in the back next? If you're in an abusive relationship with a woman and you're a man and you getting abused by a woman, God forbid, when you walk in the house, you waiting for her to slap you. If you're a man and a woman in a bad relationship, you waiting on him to slap you. You're scanning for threats. You're making sure the checkbook is balanced right because you don't want to get beat up. Y'all feel me? Or if you've been in a relationship where people have cheated on you before and you're married, now in your new marriage, you checking the phone. You checking voicemail. right? You're trying to scan the area for threats. This is what happens to church people because in truth of thoughts and re-experiencing, you avoid, and now there's a hypervigilance. So every time something happens and you see something in social media about church, you're like, oh, I know what they are. Oh, they taking everybody's money. Oh, you know they don't care nothing about you. Them leaders gonna treat you wrong. Oh, they ain't gonna like my family. Meaning that you are hyper vigilant. Instead of you going to church looking for God, you're going to church looking for threats. And this happens long before a person leaves the church or get kicked out. They're hyper vigilant because they're scanning for threats. Their spiritual safety and their emotional safety and their emotional well-being is at risk, and we don't understand. They get hyper vigilant because they're scanning for threats. People in the church become a threat to them because they've been mishandled. It's real trauma, and I'm trying as a person who actually got healed from it, who was cool. It's real trauma. It takes time to heal from that. But the church doesn't want to deal with what they may have done wrong. They would rather be right and let people be away from them. Let me tell y'all something. Scanning for threats. It's a real thing, bro. It's a real thing. And guess what? I saw the 99 scan for threats. I saw the 99 say, this is how you get exiled from the church. The 99 says, they're trying to take my church members. Or they're spreading rumors about the pastor. It doesn't matter if you spread them about somebody in the congregation. Usually, I'm just speaking from experience. But if you speak against a leader, you know what? The 99 starts to scan the one for a threat. The one becomes a danger to this 99 because the hurt goes on both sides. I don't know if the church is hurt. Now, I think the 99 is probably more angry or probably more insulted, at least in the cases that I know about. Most of the time, the 99 is not as hurt as the one because you still got 98 other people to make up that 99. So the 99 starts to scan for threats. And once the 99 scans for threats, they say, oh my God, that person is a threat. Let's lead them out here. Meaning that the church itself also, in some sick way, may have been traumatized also. Now, I do know that some pastors hurt about how a person leaves a church. But if they're really hurt when a person leaves a church, why don't they go after the person? It's like the leader is always too busy to go after the one. I'm gonna let y'all think about that. Right? Negative changes in mood and cognition, and it's deep feelings of alienation and deep feelings of guilt and shame because you're made to feel like you're wrong. You usually attempted, at least you feel this way. I'm not saying this was told to you, but there's a shame and a guilt that goes along with the trauma when you experience it from a church. Because people who used to say, I love you, they don't even talk to you. People who used to say you're gifted think you stuck now, frankly. People who used to want to embrace you think you're a disease now. I'm just telling y'all the real. There's a shame and a real guilt and deep feelings of alienation, like I don't belong. Can you imagine feeling accepted by 99 people who now, quote unquote, hate you or at least act like they hate you? No one's going to tell me that the 99 feels as bad as the one. That's impossible. That's impossible. Because usually the one didn't get into it with the 99. The one got into it with 2 or 3 people and the other people was just dragged into it. And because of groupthink, they usually side with the 99. Groupthink is when the power of a group is so strong that people just believe together, even though there's evidence that all of them are wrong. Okay? That's why it's so traumatizing. Because in PTCD or PTSD, there's extreme feelings of alienation, shame, and guilt. And persons, this is a real symptom, they start to distort their beliefs about themselves and the world. Meaning I used to have high self-esteem. Now I feel useless. I used to be happy all the time. Now I feel sad. I used to enjoy living for God, but now I'm important to God because the people who I'm supposed to be important to, they don't think I'm that important either. Meaning it starts to distort your belief of yourself and your entire worldview. Now, I'm going to talk about this in the context of the church, but it also happens in the context of PTSD. Like if I was treating a client, I would have to be aware of this stuff. I would have to be aware of shame. I would have to be aware of guilt. And then I would have to be aware of numbing, which you don't feel anything. You're traumatized so deeply, you don't respond to anything. People, this stuff is real. Another symptom of alterations in arousal or reactivity, reckless behavior. I remember getting hurt by the church and I did become more reckless because it's not a spiritual cancer or spiritual symptom. Sometimes it's how human beings are wired. When you undergo trauma, you can display reckless behavior. You can display hypervigilance. You can display avoidance. You can have sleepless nights because you are traumatized. And the church needs to set up something to deal with conflict better so nobody is further traumatized. A person should be able to leave a church because they were traumatized and they leave with band-aids and not with the knives still in their back. Or if a leader was stabbed in the back, they deserve the right to have a band-aid and not have a knife in their back. I'm not necessarily taking a side, but obviously we can see how it's easier for a hospital to maintain itself in a malpractice lawsuit. Remember, I gave you the example of the person who lost both legs when he was only supposed to lose one. Who would you rather be, the hospital or the person who lost both legs? That hospital had a duty to take care of that person. See, when the Bible talks about church members, or in Matthew 18, it wasn't talking about the character of the child. It's talking about the character of the body and how they should handle the individual. The individual needs to be treated with respect. The Bible says in Matthew, I didn't read it in 18, we are to forgive each other 7 times 70, or there's a perfect forgiveness. The one has to forgive 99. The 99 can't even forgive one. It's a cycle. All I'm saying is, God, would you rather be the hospital or would you rather be the person who lost 2 legs? Because even if that person comes back to the hospital, they're going to have to learn to walk on prosthetics because something about them was handled the wrong way. And that's why Black people fear going to the hospital, because of experiments that people did on them. But it's the same way they feel about church. Things have gone so wrong in church for them that they don't want to return back. And I don't want to hear that they didn't love God. No, they're experiencing avoidance. They're experiencing reckless behavior. They may be experiencing shame and guilt. They may have a distortion of themselves in the world. So they don't go back. They're avoiding further traumatization or re-traumatization because the church doesn't deal with the trauma. We deal in trauma. And if you don't get anything else from this episode, church trauma is real, y'all. Let's stop telling people that they mad about something petty. Who are you to tell somebody they mad about something petty? What makes you so right? Have you been in their shoes? Were you exiled by a church? Were you cussed out by a pastor? Were you told to leave a church because of something somebody thought you said? Did you lose a whole church full of friends at one time? Huh? Did the people who say I love you now say I hate you? Think about that. The next time you talk to somebody who's undergoing church hurt, you need to think about that's a real trauma. That's a real person with real issues that had a real experience, that's real hurt, that didn't have anybody real come have a real conversation so they can get really healed. And for that, we all need to be slapped. because we all owe the duty, according to Matthew 18, to handle each other with respect, with trust, with love, and like God will have us handle each other. Word, you've been on Church Unplugged. We're going to have more episodes about this. There's something that's burning on in me. I'm going to have pastors on here. I'm going to have people who've gone to church, people who have been hurt by churches. We're going to talk about it all. But what we're going to stop saying is that people who left the church are just petty people who can't get over offenses. I don't buy that. They're not just petty people who can't get over offenses. They're people who have been traumatized, and that trauma needs to be dealt with. And the people who traumatize them should love them enough to at least have a conversation. They don't have to come back to your church, but you are responsible for their healing if you mishandle it. You've been on Church Unplugged. That's CHUNPLUGG3D. That's Church Unplugged. Like, share, and subscribe. We're going to chop it up more about church hurt. And I can't wait to see y'all in these next episodes. They're going to be hot. They're going to be tight, but they definitely going to be right. This is Mikal Harris, the LCPC/pastor/person who's been healed from church hurt. I'm healed. And I'm back in the church. And now I'm out of here.